Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Hopefully, no one's in a food coma. Got some good food. I know I always enjoy London Calling's food because they have amazing vegetarian food for me every time. So, welcome. We are going to be hopefully, you're also in the right room. I just want to confirm you're here to learn about mastering discovery and requirements because there are some amazing sessions happening. This is your chance to leave to the other ones if you'd like. All right, now you're stuck with me if you're not taking that chance. So welcome, my name is Pallavi Agarwal, and before we get started, I always like to say thank you. Thank you for being here, thank you for being part of our community, and really, thank you to our organizers, our sponsors, but also to you. If you didn't show up, I'd be speaking to an empty room, so I really appreciate you all being here. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I've been doing this for a long time. Probably, I think it's 19, 20 years now. I forgot to update that slide. But I've been in consulting since day one when I graduated college and joined, and we'll get into that journey. And a lot of my experience really relies in implementations throughout and through for Fortune 100 global companies, and that's where this experience that you're gonna hear about today in requirements gathering and mastering requirements is all my personal opinions, very biased, so take what you want and leave what you don't want. It is through my own personal experience and some thought leadership as well through methodologies I've learned. I'm also a Salesforce design ambassador because design, what we're talking about today is part of design. So those who think requirements is not design, let's debunk that myth right now. That is exactly what design is. It's not just the pretty colors and UI stuff that you see. It is also the solutions and the components that are being built. I also was lucky enough to be gifted the golden hoodie last year, which it's too hot to wear today, so I apologize. And as I just do a lot of other cool things in this community that I've been privileged to do, like get to be on the stage today and speak to you all about my experiences to hopefully help you in your careers as well, because so many have helped me. And when I do have time outside of work, I do try to snowboard and travel and enjoy life a little bit and hike. So if anyone wants to climb Kilimanjaro, come see me. I'm trying to plan a trip so I don't die by myself. So all right, if anyone wants to link with me, my only favor is my brain does not really work these days. If you link in with me and want to connect, just tell me how we met so I really resonate with you and remember you and we can have the right conversations. So why am I talking about requirements today? And before I get into it, as I mentioned, I've been doing this for a really long time, but I've never always been in Salesforce. And I wanted to really depict that to show you my journey. Really started at some of the Fortune 100 consulting firms. That's where I get my experience from. And then moved into Silicon Valley to startup consulting firms. And then some firms that you know are now acquired by Salesforce. And what I really wanted to depict here was I didn't always do Salesforce. I have done many products through my career, starting with Oracle PeopleSoft Financials, actually built supply chain logistics systems using that software, custom Java to do banking. Then I took time off. I retired for 2 years and played around in the Hollywood space and hung out at Disney and did Roam BI, which was on-demand analytics. And then I went over to Fox and they were coming out with this new thing called streaming because everyone would watch TV on their phone, which was a very foreign concept, and actually helped QA their app to help get it out to the market. And then from there, I was like, you know what, I really miss consulting. I need to get back in there, and went up to San Francisco, and my first introduction to cloud was SAP CRM. That's really when I learned what cloud technology was and what it could do, because at that time, it was still fairly new in our technical life cycle. From there, I went over and learned about Oracle CPQ and did global installations. And then I went over to Acumen, and that's how I got introduced to this thing called Salesforce. And over time then, I started my own consulting firm to focus on that and continue to implement the right way. I always bring this slide up to show you that most of you are probably career transitioners as well who've worked in other products before you come over to Salesforce. All of my skills carried through my career in different ways that are transactional skills. And a lot of that is what we use in our BA world of requirements gathering, the empathy, and things like that. So that's why I always like to call this out, to make sure you don't feel alone and don't feel like you don't belong in the Salesforce ecosystem. All right, so let's talk, oops, wrong way, learning this new clicker. So let's talk about discovery. And I don't like to talk to a group, I like this to be conversational, so I also don't go into food coma after the wonderful lunch we just had. So can someone tell me how they describe discovery? What's the definition? And this is a safe space, no answer is wrong. Anybody? Is everyone asleep? Yes.
It's like to learn about a business, how they operate, and listen to what people in business have to say. So listening and just learn.
Listening and learning about the business and how they operate, great. Finding the right path. Finding the pain points. Anybody else? Understanding business processes.
Understanding the business, the who's who the people are, what the structure is, hierarchy, who's making decisions.
Amazing. Understanding who's who, the hierarchies, the structures, the decision makers.
What's the vision and goal?
Visions and goals. All right, y'all want to come up here and present for me? Those are right dead on, all of those, right? And so when we're going into requirements gathering, the first few things, and this applies, just to say it, this is not just for a BA. This applies to program managers. This applies to business stakeholders, product owners, architects, functional and solution, developers. We all have to go through this life cycle and really think about what are our goals? Who are we doing this for? How are we going to measure success? Who are our decision makers? Who are the players who are not the decision makers that are actually going to use it? And one thing we all almost always forget, the documentation. Because I don't think I'll be alive forever, so whatever I did, somebody needs to know what I did and why I did it, right? So the documentation shouldn't always just be, this is what was done, but it should also include why this was done. Because technology is ever changing, when we're looking at something in the present today, the decisions that were made back then, some of those features may not have been available, and that's why they did some things. So when you're doing your documentation, please also put the reasoning behind the decisions that were made for that solution, so the next person can understand, like, oh, this wasn't just crappy stuff. This makes sense because these features weren't available, and this was the best solution at that time, which might not be the best solution today. So that's one piece in documentation that always gets missed. Half the time the documentation doesn't even exist. So that's a very big, important piece that I want to call out that is part of requirements gathering and discovery. So a lot of this stuff is around how to be successful. How are we going to get the right information? Anyone have kids or nieces or nephews or hang out with kids? My 4-year-old niece, I love her to death, but everything is why. And I give her an answer, but why? And I give her an answer, but why? Until she feels satisfied. That is exactly what we should be doing in all of our sessions. We should never take it for what it is, because half the time you'll realize they were saying they wanted a banana, but really they wanted a fruit basket. And I wish I had known they wanted a fruit basket, so I would have built the foundation the right way to then put all the fruits in the basket like I needed to, rather than just focusing on the banana. So that why is really important, but you also want to understand at a high level, like, who is this impacting from a stakeholder perspective? Why are we even doing it for the business? How is this impacting the mission? Why should we do this? Is this going to increase the bottom line? Is this a short-term solution versus a long-term solution? That's usually at that 10,000-foot level or the high level. But then you also want to get down to the users with the pain points. Why are we trying to solve for this? Who are we trying to solve for this? And really understanding both of that, the depth and the breadth of it. And that, when you do that, you will really, really resonate with putting together the best solution possible. Leanne's conversation, her talk earlier today, talked about worst projects. I can tell you, they happen all the time. And my example, what is a live example, Department of State, we were building out their logistics system. We spent 7 days a week, no Christmas, no birthdays, nothing, building out the system because we were very behind on our deadlines to get to UAT. We got to UAT, we flew in all of the users. Within 5 minutes, every user was like, this is crap. We don't do it this way. And me and our team, who had been working tirelessly for months, our hearts just sank because the stakeholders designed it who don't use it, and we never asked the whys at the right levels. And that was the worst timing, worst project, because the go live was promised in 2 months. So you can imagine how much more we worked to revamp that system to get it right for the go live. But that's where you want, that was my first lesson in consulting, and I'm glad I learned it early because it always reminded me to call the right people to the room and make sure everybody was there. So that's where you're constantly learning. You're also wanting to roadmap things, right? You don't want to just do the why for now. Where does this fit into the bigger map, right? Think about you're going from train station destination A, but your long-term destination could be somewhere else. So you also always want to know, where are we taking this train and what does that eventual final destination look like, which in today's world is usually 2 to 3 years because technology is so ever evolving. Anything beyond that on a roadmap, you can just pretend like it doesn't exist because it'll change. So you want to build for that. And then someone also mentioned in the discovery part, we want to know who the players are. Those are what we call our personas and user stories. And so that's where you talk about your stakeholders. And then you say, okay, these are my stakeholders, these are my decision makers. There's the CMO, there's the CFO in this particular engagement. But then we have our marketing managers and our sales team. We might have our accountants and our billing department. And then you start building these personas and then go into user stories. And one of the things someone talked about, I love it, you guys should be up here presenting because process. It's not just about answering or building for the solution. In our world, at our company, we don't even talk about technology and discovery. We're not allowed to use technology terms. So we say, no, stop. Don't tell me you want a drop down or this is what the screen should look like. Just tell me what your business does and what's your process. And half the time you get all your pain points. You ask the whys and I don't know, we've always just been doing it this way. So then we call that the current state process mapping. And then we say, okay, now you have a genie with unlimited wishes. What would you like? And the creativity that flows in that room, because now they're just focused on their day-to-day of what they're doing and saying, my life would be so much easier if I had this. So then you build out the future process maps, and then you build the solution. So then you have higher user adoption as well, because now you're building something they actually want. Then you always want to make sure there's no scope creep, because that always happens. So that's why early on you go to that identify goals and measure success. Because once you identify the goals, then you can always call out, this is great, let's put it for the future. It's not part of this right now. And we'll come back to this. So you don't lose that information. You just put it on hold in the parking lot or future backlog. And you always talk about the present of what we're trying to build in that scope. And then, really thinking about, how is this change going to impact? Do we really need to do this? Is there a better option? So a lot of us like to jump right into the solutioning, and I sometimes do it too. And I'm like, oh, great, yeah, we'll just do a web to case and this and that and a round robin, and we'll get your system up and running. It's like, no, I need to take a step back. Why are we even doing this? What are we trying to solve for? And then it goes back to, wait, what are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? Let's see if this works. Okay. So, some of the things that I use as general questions is sometimes I walk into a meeting, and our first meeting, we usually don't have any agendas except tell us how you do your business. And if they're just I don't know, we actually sometimes give them pre-homework. We're go draw it out, even if it's on a piece of napkin, what your process looks like today. It doesn't have to be perfect, just draw it out. And then we start going through it and say, what are your pain points? Where are we going from here? And half the time they're actually, I thought I wanted a banana, but it was really an orange. As they go through that process, because they didn't take time to think through what their needs were either, and wanted to make sure that, we're just solving for this because we're all busy in our day-to-day and we see a problem and we need a solution. But sometimes we need to help them, guide them in taking a step back. There's also like needs and nice to have. So I'm the client for my team, for our system in Salesforce. And half the time I'm like, guys, can I just get this? And they're like, do you really need it? And I'm like, well, yeah, it would do this. And like, okay, but why? I'm like, because this one time, and like, so you don't really need it, right? So it becomes a nice to have. And I'm like, oh man, all right, you're right. I don't need it, right? So you really have to also balance that too of, is this really needed? We call it an 80-20 rule, right? Is this happening 80% of the time? Or is it impacting 80% of your business? So it could happen once a year, but if it's significant, 80% significance, or it's recurring so much, then it's worth it. If it's the 20%, can we come up with a different approach? And can we talk about this later? Because it's not the main point. So also thinking about that, and then always thinking ahead, right? No more Band-Aid solutions. We know what's happening in the roadmap with our release notes. We're the closest to it. So if we know something's coming down the line and it's not there right now, do we really need to build it now, or can they wait for that release and we can just hold off on this? Or can we build a Band-Aid solution that's not completely like regutting it in the future, but it's in a way that when the feature comes out, it'll support this. So always thinking about that long-term scalability, longevity. So we have like, is it usable? Is it scalable? Is it upgradable? There's other ones that we use, but those are the three main ones, right? And if it doesn't pass that test, that solution needs to be redone. And that goes back to the requirements, because like, well, is it usable? Is it gonna help solve that goal and the problem? So what we always do in our sessions is really talk about the business and break it down to the nitty-gritty. And I'm still old school because I learned the Accenture, Deloitte way like a long time ago, and once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. So I still have our team do the traditional BRDs, which we call the Bible or the Holy Grail. And I can't tell you how many times it's saved us on engagements, because we have been able to go right back to it and said, this is what you signed off on, and you told us this was your information. And so it becomes our warranty, security, CYA, but also it puts it on paper for the clients to really be like, wait, is this really what we do? Or no, actually, that's not how I meant to say it. I meant to say it this. So it helps revalidate, but also really understand it. And there's some great tools out there that we use for the process mapping. This one, the process map images you see right now are with Elements Cloud. They're out there. Tell them I sent you. I'm just kidding. So we use Elements because it does do a lot. And you can bring it right into the forefront of the system. So now this information is not just sitting in one place on a document on a drive. You can actually bring it into Salesforce and show these documented pieces right as you're doing the flow to be like, yep, this is our business process. So anyone new who's joining your company now can be trained up faster. So this is just an example, and you'll see, right? You don't see anything technical here. This is all about the business. And so here you're like, Erica connects with this person, Christy does this. And it's literally all about the business. And our architects are sitting in this call or these conversations because behind the scenes, as they're hearing and actively listening and understanding, they're starting to put the foundation and the technical and the solutions together. So then there's just more examples of this, right? But then we also take it and then start leveling it up for the business to understand, saying, okay, we learned all of this from you. Here's a breakdown of certain personas and areas to target based on what we heard. Here's the themes we saw, the systems you have, and what your functions and needs are. And put it together in an executive readout so the business at that 10,000 foot level can also understand what we were doing at the 15 foot level, talking to the users. So I always love this. It's so old, but it still holds true. I just want a show of hands of how many people have gone through this. I literally just went through this last year with a customer, so. legit, one of my customers was like, well, you tell us our business requirements. Like, I don't live in your business. I can't. And the reason she couldn't comprehend was a lot of times she was just thinking of the system as a system, and we're the system experts. So just tell me you should build a system. But it wasn't about that. So that's where bringing it back to the business and level setting that we're not here to talk about the system. We're here to talk about your business and your functions and your inefficiencies that you want to streamline or things you want to automate or the goals that you have. And then let's figure out the system. So then I also like this, right? There's always going to be serendipity because there's always that aha moment. And it's usually by the customer being like, you know what? We need to go talk about this internally. We never thought about this as part of our process. So don't just take my word for it. There are other resources out there. Forbes has a great article of like why discovery should not be excluded. A lot of people are like, even today in the client world, feel like discovery is a waste of money and they just want the system right away. Force the discovery, show them why it shouldn't be included. It should be included because a lot of times when you skip that piece, you end up spending more time and money in getting the system right versus just talking about it right away. And then those of you who really want to go down that path and learn more, there's some great Trailhead modules as well. And then other business magazines have published as well on that. I'll put this QR code back up for anyone who needs it, but I know we probably have we have 3 minutes, so we're gonna do Q&A. Does anyone have questions or comments? Because I'm not the only expert. I'm sure you guys have things to offer from your own experiences. Yes.
How do you cater for requirements that the business isn't aware of as well?
How do you cater for requirements they're not aware of?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why we do that process map where we're like, just draw out what you do. And then we start going through it.
Yeah, but often, I don't know if everyone has this, and I'm really keen to hear about if anyone else does, but ideally what I'm saying is we do ask and we do try to fact find where possible, but the business almost always has evolving requirements themselves. At that point, I know it's kind of about like scalability of your solution as well, but it is something that we start to think quite a bit.
Yeah. So it's a fine line to walk because sometimes our customers are like, oh yeah, and then when we do this Stripe integration and this and that, or if we get automatic, like that's great. Can we come back to this, right? And sometimes you do have to be that manager in the room, like to be like, great, this was a great therapy session. Thanks for sharing all your feelings about this, but can we come back to this now, right? So you have to know when to bring them back because you're the one guiding that ship. So, and if you don't feel satisfied, like my 4-year-old niece, of the whys being answered, you need to keep asking till you feel satisfied. And that just over time, as you keep drilling, you'll see it. And no one's going to get it perfect the first time. We still don't, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years, right? Because yes, to your point, we only know what we know based on what they tell us, but there are patterns and trends you'll see, right? And then when you're working with your technical team, they'll also be like, but did you ask this? Because they're trying to solution it, so that's how you also catch it.